Live, preparing to stream.
We go.
So yeah, it's still the bar is still moving. Give it a couple more seconds. Yes, we are live.
Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Jess Baldry. I'm a journalist for Delano magazine in Luxembourg. I'd like to extend a warm welcome on this International Women's Day 2021 to everyone who's tuned in. I recognise that we're competing with a lot of other events, so thank you very much for choosing us. International Women's Day is about change for a better, more equitable future. Education will play a major role in stamping out inequalities, and today we're going to talk about digital education and where it starts. Madhumalti Sharma has co-written Let's Code Python, a beginner's guide with a hint of data science, a book that accompanies young learners, equipping them with the tools to explore and master some of the most sought-after skills in the world. Joining us today are Group Technology Evangelist, Harvey Nash Group, David Savage, Computer Science teacher at the Lycée Technique Ettelbruck and founder of the Maker Movement in Luxembourg, Mark Teusch, Data Scientist, Luxembourg Ambassador for Women in Data Science and Council Member for Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry Luxembourg, Nupur Mittal, Teacher and Project Coordinator for Script, the service for coordinating research for technological innovation and learning, Claude Reuter, and Director, Praxis Business School, coder, co-author of this book, and author of 2 full-length science fiction novels in English, Pritish Mukherjee. Welcome everybody. And of course, our last panellist is the founder of Workshop for Me, EU Code Week Ambassador, Madhumalti Sharma. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Madhumalti, thank you very much for organising this event. So we've got, for people who've just joined us, we're going to be talking for the next around 45 minutes, working through questions about this book, but also about digital skills and where this book figures on that landscape. So first question, I wonder, Pritish, please can you explain for the non-tech people like myself, what is Python? Who uses it and what is it for?
Well, Python is a very versatile and general purpose programming language. I mean, it's comparable to say C or Java or any of the others. But so it can be used for a variety of things. You can use Python to build websites. You can use Python to control robots. You can use Python to analyze data. You can do Python to use a whole lot of things. But Python has become very widely popular because of 2 reasons. Number one is it's very, very simple to use. Compared to any of the other programming languages, Python is much easier, much user-friendly, especially for the new learner. If you're a veteran programmer, it's okay. But if you're a new learner, Python is extremely simple and people get coding in about half an hour or so. So it's very useful, very friendly. And secondly, because data science has become a very popular profession these days, and Python is the kind of the language for data science. Most data scientists use Python, and hence Python has got an additional, kind of a benefit that it's very useful for a very important line of business and a profession.
Thank you very much. So we know that Python is a general purpose language used in data manipulation and cleaning. Madhumalti explains in her book that data is the new oil. But can you explain how businesses are able to extract value from this data? This is a question for David, please.
Well, first of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk. And it's good to hear from Pritesh that you can learn in 30 minutes, because I'll be perfectly honest, I was rubbish at maths and science at school. So I'm joining you in the non-technical camp, Jess. But look, that fast learning curve is incredibly important, because data is so important to so many organizations. You only have to look at the track record of a company like Spotify, never made a profit, but wildly valued because of the amount of data that it holds on its users. Equally, you can kind of see how contentious data can become because of the fact that you've got organizations the size of Salesforce and Oracle going through class action lawsuits at the moment, and groundbreaking legal cases being fought across Europe at the minute because of the way that organizations are taking that data and the value that it has when they package it up and resell it on to other organizations. To understand, the inherent value that we have here, and the ethical kind of debates around who should have control of that data kind of rumble on. But fundamentally, it's incredibly important to organizations. A lot of organizations right now are trying to better understand their data. You can see across the industry that CIOs are placing great pressure on chief data officers and their colleagues to better build data machines at scale within enterprise. A lot of organizations have a huge amount of data, but it isn't necessarily structured in the way that it should. So yeah, absolutely, data is this kind of gold of the modern age, and understanding it and making use of it is incredibly important to organizations. And so any tool, any way that people can better understand and utilize that data is obviously very welcome. So this book falls squarely into a very useful a space there.
Thank you, David. So let's talk about jobs then. So I was just reading the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs survey from 2020. They estimated that by 2025, 85 million jobs are going to be misplaced or will shift the division of labour between humans and machines, and 97 million new roles may emerge. So I wonder if some of the panellists can expand on the types of jobs that we will see in future that would require skills for handling data and knowledge of programs like Python. This is a question for Nupur, please.
Thank you, Jess. As David and Prithvish said before, data is only starting to be recognized in industries and corporates and research sector for its importance. Some companies have started to tap into that power and potential of data, and there are many that need to follow. We are just entering into the world of leveraging the data for making applications for the betterment of humans, for financial gains, for all other aspects. In light of that, I personally think that there's a lot more we can do in the health industry with the use of data and applications of data science. For example, detecting diseases and diagnosis before clinical diagnosis, so to have symptoms of patients and so on, to optimize the supply chain of medicines, medical equipments. In current times, we see there is a dire need of the cold refrigerators, the cold storage, the optimizing the chains, how vaccines will be transferred from one place to another. Mapping all this data using machine learning, using data science for this can be groundbreaking, and I think we will see a lot more data science expertise and jobs required in the coming years there. In addition to this, I think HR and recruitment can really benefit from the use of data science, screening of the CVs and helping candidates have personalized interviews for certain job positions. I think there is a lot more potential there. And overall, we see an increase in data architects, solution architects, data scientist positions, data analysis, visualization, data managers, CDOs, as David mentioned. So there are a lot of roles that you see coming up, and in market there is a huge demand for filling in those shoes.
Thank you, Nupur. I think it's really interesting, the point you raise about medicine, and that's maybe one great thing we've seen in this last year, that unfortunately we've had the pandemic, but it has accelerated how we analyse data in that environment. So hopefully we'll see some good things coming out of that soon. Okay, I wonder, yeah, you mentioned a few profiles there, Nupur. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that a little bit more. What kind of profiles could people apply for in future if they have these skills? I mean, specifically Python, for instance.
I think with Python, the first profiles that come to my mind are already data analysis, where you combine a bit of mathematical or statistical background and you use Python with that to gain more insights in the humongous amount of data. So the data now is so big, one application or one organization is able to generate so much data that for a group of human beings, it's impossible to look into that. So you need programs, you need computers, so you need Python as an easy tool, rather easier to look into that data, so data analysis. Once you have insights into the data, you can start to modelize it, you can start to make applications out of it using data science. Then you need data architects who are going to store this data in a form that someone else can use it. The applications, the softwares that we are talking about can have access to this data. So you need to store it properly. There you have data architects and engineers who help build an ecosystem of data and its storage and the application around.
Thank you. I always wondered what a data architect was, but you've explained it so well for me. So, I mean, we talk about skills, and for many years, Madhumalti and I have been discussing that Luxembourg has been lagging behind in teaching some of these skills. But what are the stakes if we don't train young people in Luxembourg in these areas? This is a question for Mark, please.
Well, actually, like many of you said before, I think that coding in general and the general approach to data analysis and understanding what's going on around us in the modern world where we live in interconnected things, and I mean everything is connected. You have a smartphone, you have your tablet, you have your television, you have your car, you have everything. But we need to understand, not the old ones as I am, but the younger generation needs really to understand thoroughly how this works. So coding and growing up with these skills is more than important. It is vital. It's like a language that you teach. It's similar to if you are in a foreign country and you don't speak English, for example, it's hard to come around. And our science world and our all-day world here needs the skill of coding as being able to analyze all the data that's being used and making the best use of everything. So if we don't teach these skills, we are going to lose a generation of potential, savers, architects, engineers. Everybody who really wants to bring a solution close should be able to think in a coding way, think in a structured way. And especially with a language like Python, which makes it really easy to get started fast and efficient, I think it's really important that nobody should lack that skill, especially in our modern schools.
Thank you, Mark. So let's talk about the book, which is the reason we're all here today. Now, this book in the Amazon store section, which is dedicated to learning Python, I have to say, Madhumalti, it looked the least intimidating book. So congratulations. I think that was what you were looking to accomplish. But I'm curious to know, at what age or skill level is the book pitched?
So thanks, Jess, for saying that it looks least intimidating. I think that aspect is important, because the idea was to make it easy to use and to make people want to really learn the language. So this is good. The age to which it is targeted, so it is actually for young children who have done some block-based programming and want to get into text-based programming. So maybe they have done a little bit of Scratch or App Inventor or other drag and drop programs, and now they say, okay, I want to learn an actual computer language, so let's start with Python. So that's one age group that it is targeted towards. So it could be anyone from 12, 13, 14-year-olds. The examples in the book are very focused towards high school and middle school students. So, 14, 15-year-old students who would want to do it. That being said, even adults who are interested in learning to program, they are a good audience for this book, because it is not as intimidating. It's like a children's book. The text is big, it's easy to read. You don't have to necessarily have your reading classes when you're reading it. It has a lot of pictures as you go along with it, and you don't have to do any installation. So you can actually just go on to the website and code, and just write your code there, and you carry it along with you, just like you do Google Docs or Google Photos. It goes with you on the Google Colab platform. So there's actually quite a wide range of people. Anyone who's interested to learn to code in a text-based language is a good audience for the book.
I accept that challenge, Madam Alti. I'm going to give it a try. So we're talking very abstractly about the book, but maybe you can, maybe yourself and Pritish, you can tell us in more detail what you can be found in the book, and what are the highlights for you. And at this point, I'm going to share some visuals. So please do. Perhaps we'll start with Madam Alti. Yeah.
Okay, so for what's in the book, it starts with the very basics. So you start by learning the different concepts, whether it is what is a variable and how do you create loops, how do you do simple calculations which you could possibly just do using a calculator, but how you can make it simple using a programming language. And then it slowly goes on to other applications of Python. So how do you draw with it, how do you have plot graphs with it. And then towards the end of the book we go into using Panda. You go into modules of how you can do data analysis with it. And then there is also a section where we go into exercises of two real world scenarios. So a retail superstore and an e-commerce website to see how it is to work with it. So I mean, like you can see, there are a lot of doodles, a lot of little pictures. You have these boxes which explain things. So for example, debugging, there'll be it'll tell you very simply what debugging is. And we have this little doodle of the girl trying to get rid of the bugs. So it's kind of made in a way where it will make sense, and for someone who's just started to learn the intricacies in a manner which is going to be useful to do.
Pritish, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, the book was written from a perspective of somebody who has never ever done coding before. Okay. So, if you want to learn Python and you go to Google and search for Python tutorials, you will find hundreds of Python tutorials. But those are all good for people who are already into programming. They have done, they can search, they can do stuff. So for them, it's a good add-on. But for a person who has never ever written a program, it is too intimidating. So we assume that the person who's coming in, the little kid, or even his or her parents, they have no idea. So they want to start with a clean slate. The first intimidation people face is they have to install some software. No, we don't. We are using the Google Colab hosted platform where all you need is a browser. The Chrome browser is good, or even the Mozilla is do. And everybody in this world today, whoever has access to a computer, has familiar with how to use a browser. I mean, that's the first thing people do. So once you fire up the browser, you visit Google, and Google Colab, we have given the links for it. And then you are there. You write your code there itself, like you send an email. So that you write your code and it runs in front of your eyes instantly without having to download or install anything. So there you are, in about 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, we have written 2, 3 programs already. This gives people the confidence that, I can do it as well. It is not something for them. It's something that I can do. Okay, and that is the most important thing that people need to learn, that anybody can code if they have the clarity of mind and they have the intention, they can do it. And that's what we are trying to establish in this book of ours.
I think that's wonderful that you can already start coding. But specifically, what can they then, once a person has completed this book? I mean, it's a kind of a curriculum, I suppose, in itself. But what could a person would they then be able to do specifically?
Specifically, we have given 2 or 3 simple examples. I mean, one of the most useful things is, analyzing marketing information. People sell things, okay? In any store you go, there's some sales happening, there are some salesmen, there are some products being sold, orders being picked up. So in any business that you run, there has to be some kind of a sales tracking, sales analysis function. I mean, that is the simplest thing you can do. Okay, so we begin with that, analyze sales. I mean, which product is the best product, which customer is my best customer. So we begin there. From there you can go on to many big things. You can do full-fledged machine learning, neural networks. Everything is possible with Python, but we restrict ourselves right now to analysis of sales data or similar data. and we have used sales as an example because that is what people relate to very easily. Everybody has seen a shop, everybody has seen a salesperson, so people can relate to it very easily. So it is not something abstract. You can actually do a small bit of analysis and come to some reasonably nice conclusions at the end of this book.
Great, that sounds wonderful. And confidence, as you say, is such an important thing in the learning process. It's great to have these measurables already to be able to see what you've achieved. Now, the book was tested, I believe. Some of the people on the panel were amongst the beta testers. So I wonder what was the feedback that you had. This is a question for Nupur and Claude, please. Should we start with Claude?
Yes, sure. Yes, when Mathemati asked me first to pre-read the book, I first thought, oh, okay, another book about Python. There are so many. But from the starting, I realized that this book has some advantages compared to other books. First of all, as we already said, you don't have to worry about anything. You don't need an environment, start an installation, and so on. You can start right from the beginning. So it's really easy to use. But there are two other points I want to point out. When writing a script as a programmer, should always care about the result, not just about the result. Often, the programmer look at the script and tries to let it work without errors. Okay, that is very important that the script has no errors. But what also matters a lot is the performance of the script. Is the algorithm optimized? Is it working fast enough? There are often so many ways to do a task. Most books just introduce to programming language and just focus on the result, a script without bugs. But in this book, the reader is invited to reflect on the optimization, on the process, not just the result. So that's really interesting. And lastly, I want to mention that the Ask Yourself part at the end of each chapter. This invites the reader to reflect on his learning process and incites him to go further, to deepen his knowledge about Python. It's not a must. You can also finish the book without searching for more information. But for those who want to learn more, well, they can take this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Claude. And so, Nupur, I believe you tried this on was it your niece?
Yes. So my niece, who's 8 years old, was not intimidated. I'm being a programmer myself. I have always heard, and in this interview until now, we have heard the word intimidating almost 10 times. Trust me, the book is not intimidating. It is opposite of intimidating. It is attractive for children. As you were showing the visuals recently, there are doodles. Some of them are so illustrative, so simple and so illustrative, so eye-catching that it makes you read the book. I'm pretty sure as a kid, but also as an adult. So I would not say that the book is restricted to only young kids, as Madhumalti was just saying. Anyone who has intentions of learning Python, it's a very good resource. As Prithvish was mentioning, internet bookstores are full of Python, and not only Python, all kind of books. When you are a beginner, you open internet and you say, okay, Python course, and it will show you so many results that you wouldn't even be able to start with one. And my strong advice is, if you are a beginner, start with this book. It starts with the basics, really everything that you need to know. I'm not sure if any beginner's course will tell you what debugging is. Debugging is a process of finding mistakes or errors in the code and then finding a good way to correct them. It is important to not make mistakes in the code, but that is not the only thing you need to know. You need to know where or how to correct them. And the book really levels up different aspects of learning Python. I covered 2 chapters with my little niece, and she has promised me to take it further from there. She was intimidated by computers and the use of them, and I'm assuming and hoping that the book is already a success, because an 8-year-old kid could put their hands on it. I think we don't need to say more. It's just need to be read and used now.
Well, that's so fascinating. I hope she manages to complete it. For someone like me, when I hear the words data science, it does sound quite complex. But when we see it through the optic of this book, and from what everyone's been saying today, is it's really not that hard. It's so easy. An 8-year-old can do it, although probably an 8-year-old can do a lot more things than I can in some technologies. But I'm curious just to know about the general landscape. I mean, at what age can and should young people be learning these skills? And how young are they learning them in Luxembourg? And this is a question for Claude and Mark. If we can start with Claude, please.
Sure. Yes, in 2001, Kransky referred to the young people that raise up in our digital society as digital natives, he called them. But we know that just being familiar with digital technologies and using them in our everyday life, well, it does not necessarily translate into skillfully using them. So that's why you have to start learning these skills at very early age, understanding our digital society, even being able to produce and not just consume digital content, reflecting on the algorithms hidden under the graphical user interface. That is the new literacy every child has to learn besides reading, writing, and calculating. I just looked at Mitch Resnick from the MIT once said, young people today have lots of experience interacting with new technologies, but a lot less so of creating or expressing themselves with new technologies. And I think it's really important that young people know how to express themselves using these new technologies. So starting early already in kindergarten in a playfully way, naturally, will help win new hearts and minds to computing, and surely perhaps also helps to overcome the existing gender gap when it comes to technical professions. So I think that kids should learn innovation by doing without necessarily being aware that they are engaging with digital content, complex content.
Thank you.
Yes, I totally agree on that. Being the founder of the makerspace movement in Luxembourg, I think that the earlier you teach or the earlier you take kids onto complex technology, the better it is, because we often, as saying this as a teacher, see problems where there are none for these kids. Actually, we make it more complex than it actually is. So if we go straight forward and give them the opportunity to try something out, you know, I strongly believe in the idea of try out and learn something new without even being told that you're learning something, and it happens naturally. And that's very, very important. So I couldn't agree more with Claude, and actually the Ministry of Education does as well, with the initiative of giving coding, or at least some basic knowledge of coding, to kids as young as age 8 or even younger, is a really strong success factor when it comes to developing these skills, and also gaining new interest in science and technology, where we are lacking a lot of jobs for the moment. So I think that the earlier they touch it, and the easier it gets for them to get interested in that, and the more successfully we will fill those gaps in our current job situation.
And so in terms of, so thank you, Mark, but in terms of teaching these skills and closing the skills gap, I mean, where is Luxembourg? Is it very far behind, or is it catching up? Again, this question is for Mark and Claude.
Well, for me, I think that the Ministry of Education did really a huge gap in the past years by, first of all, installing makerspaces into schools. This is happening now since 2015. We have over 40 makerspaces running in schools for students dedicated to their activities. That is very important. And with the coding effort that they are doing right now, coding is happening in, we call that cycle 4. So that's the 6th primary school year, actually. They want to actually populate this in primary school as early as, like I said, 8. Sorry. And this effort alone shows that there is a gap. Yes, there has been a gap. It's true. But we are trying to fill it wisely and as intelligently as possible, and not just by being broad, but by being clear in what we want and what we want to achieve, and especially without confusing our customers, which is the kids. We want to bring over the fun and show them that it's really native to really help them staying a digital native. That is very important in this system.
Would you like to add anything, Claude?
Yes, perhaps this school year computational thinking, it's not just coding, but computational thinking, which is much more wider than just coding, has been integrated, as Mark already said, for 10 to 12-year-old children this year, and will be integrated across all subjects from cycle 1, that means from 4-year-old children coming next September. So we're starting very early in Luxembourg now. Another interesting part perhaps is also to mention that we are working together with external partners to get together external partners from the digital domain with professionals in school. So because that would be an interesting process where both can win-win situation, where both can help each another. I just want also to point out that we are not just only talking about informatics in school, but rather about something, well, let's name it computer science or something else. We have to foster the digital competencies of young people to make them mature and responsible citizens. In 2020, so last year, we released the Luxembourgish Median Compass. It is based on the digital competence framework from the EU, which has 5 domains with 16 competencies which are going from information research over communication, creation of digital content, safety, and also digital well-being. So coding or computational thinking is one of these 16 competencies. So it's really important to see this overall process, just integrating them in the digital world, not just the coding. So there are a lot of activities going on in this domain, and this median compass that we introduced last year will be the red line for media education in Luxembourg.
Wonderful. Are there any other projects in the pipeline in this area, Claude?
Well, the next project will be that we are starting now from, as I said, from next September on for 4-year-old children, so over whole elementary school. We're doing it in transversal measure, so that's not just one subject, but it's integrated in all subjects, and it's going on in secondary schools afterwards, and not just, as I said, it's not an informatic course, but it's about something like computer science.
Super. So we started this event by talking about International Women's Day, and I think it's no secret that women are underrepresented in this area. So this is a question for Nupur, but how can we encourage more young people, and especially more young women in this track?
The biases that we see in the society, the gap that you are mentioning between young women in Python, in data science, in technical fields, in STEM-related fields is, in my opinion, a result of a bias that is induced at a very early age. So to close the gap, we have to start at that age. We have to start when they start to go to school. Both Mark and Claude were saying that at a very young age, we need to induce them to think. We need to induce them to think computationally, to have a logical thinking. We also need to make them aware of no biases. There is no way our minds work differently for a problem of computer science or a mathematical problem. So the biases really need to be tackled in school at the age when kids start to go to the school, and then in the family, because family plays a very big role in how we bring up the children, how we start to make the differences in what a boy can do and what a girl cannot do. And we need to break the barrier there. We need to attack it at 4 and not at 14. At 14, we have already missed 10 years of opportunity, and we have molded either a girl or a boy into thinking they are made for doing specific tasks. So in my opinion, the most important thing to do is to really start when they go to school.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big task, isn't it? It's more than just bringing studies into schools. It's about households, it's about parenting, it's about how we dress our children. And on that question, I wonder if Madhumalti would like to come in, because she did create workshop for me, and she has specifically, I think, workshop classes for girls. Is that right?
Yes, Jess, it sounds so surprising. Why do we need to have, like many people say, why do we need to celebrate International Women's Day, right? Shouldn't it be that we are all equal and we don't need a day? I'm looking forward to having that day where we don't need to celebrate it anymore. So similarly, when we have coding sessions, so I know when we started workshop for me 7 years ago and we were doing coding sessions, the brothers were continuing, whereas the sisters were dropping out. And I've been working in my technical domain with IBM for many years, where in fact Pritish and I are both colleagues from the IBM days from long, long ago. So that's also one of the reasons why we got together to do this book. So we had been working a lot on trying to, get more girls involved in STEM and technology and see how it is for them. And one of the programs I was involved with was to get girls at young ages to do it. And for that, we did a lot of girl focused activities. Like we did a camp where we would get students from school in and show them the different possibilities in doing science. It was called Excite, exploring interest in technology and engineering. So following that approach, I did girls only sessions here at workshop for me with only girls joining in. And I don't know how it works, but it does. I think girls feel safer and more comfortable in trying to share and create with their peers. If they fail, if they're not able to do something, they're able to get the confidence. And I think after they do it for some time, then it doesn't matter whether they are in a girls only session or if they're in mixed sessions with both boys and girls. But a little bit of a push and help makes it happen, and overall then the confidence level increases as well. So there are a lot of good side effects of learning computational thinking. Learning to code is one of the ways one can also build confidence. I've spoken about that as well. So I think this is a great way to get girls involved in it. And as Nupur said, I think we as parents should start at a young age. So if you're changing the hard disk of your computer, get your daughter to help you, do it with you as well. Don't think that it is only something which your son has to do. And I mean, I know Mark and I have had discussions about this earlier about trying to have a girl in the robotics team, for example. You don't take the girl in because she's a girl. You try to make sure that both boys and girls are given the opportunity to learn and do, and you're taking her in the team because she's going to add value. Not that she's in there because you want to be diverse and you need to have a girl in it. So I think that's why we have to start like really, really early.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Well, we're reaching the end of this panel. We just have one last question, and this is for David, who's been sitting very, very patiently throughout. So we talked briefly about parents and how can they play a role in this, in encouraging the curiosity in this field amongst their children. Do you have any concrete suggestions or examples?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And I think Madame Malti obviously has a huge amount of knowledge here with what she's managed to achieve in her own two children, who I was very lucky to have on my own podcast a few years ago. First of all, I'd agree wholeheartedly and echo with Mark and Claude earlier about talking about the fact it needs to be fun and it needs to engage people. Technology needs to engage people without them really knowing. I was talking to a company not too long ago who used school summer classes for preschool and young children to basically run coding classes disguised as creating games. So where they have to kind of design these monsters that eat cupcakes, and children creating games is a wonderful way to get them to learn to code. Nupur also made some really interesting comments early on. There's a huge range of roles in technology. I know we're talking specifically about data, but there are creative roles. It's not, when we think about technology, we tend to think in terms of very outdated stereotypes that aren't necessarily true. Data can be creative. I was talking to someone just a couple of days ago, someone called Kat Wildman, who studied sociological sciences. She's a scientist. She loves to experiment, but she then went into product engineering, and product in itself is a very creative role. So when you get someone in the family and you're talking about someone with a science background and someone with an artistic or creative background, that artistic creative background has a home in technology, and that person can be encouraged to take on those studies and into further and higher education. And absolutely, whilst we need to start at a young age, what you see is girls outperforming boys in maths and in science, but they're not continuing those studies through because they have that outdated perception of what a career in technology might be. So changing that perception and keeping that curiosity going, especially fighting through parents' misconception. There's a lot of parents who don't work in technology who might not really understand these career paths that their children might be looking at. So that's somewhere where teachers in particular can support parents to make sure that curiosity, that flame, is kind of kept going. I suppose the last thing that I'd mention is I was lucky a week ago to talk to someone called Dr. Crystal Johnson, who's the Deputy Director for Technology and Research Investments at NASA. And I hijacked the conversation I was having because I've got a 15-year-old goddaughter who's interested in science and technology. And sometimes I don't really know what to say to her, if I'm perfectly honest. So I said to Crystal, what would you say to my goddaughter? Why should she continue science and technology studies? And her answer was quite simple. It was a case of do what you love. It's not about trying to push children down one avenue or another. If we come back to the book, Madame Malty's sitting there and Claude's sitting there with books on the shelves. I only moved house at the weekend, so I've got blank space behind me. But when I was a kid, I loved the fact that my parents had books all over the house and you could walk up and pick things up. So a book that's not intimidating, that does have pictures, those things might sound trite, but they're not. Having something like that you can pick up a shelf and is enticing to a child is huge. It can't be understated. So encouraging things that people love and telling them that they, giving them the opportunity to run with it is so powerful. So I think that's a great thing to hear. And yeah, all right, we've said intimidating 10 times, but the fact that it's not intimidating is hugely important.
Thank you so much, David. So that's the end of our panel. Just a very, very quick summary because we covered so many things today. Thank you. It's been really, really fascinating. But just a few takeaway points for me of what I learned today was that coding is vital. It's like living in a foreign country. You have to learn the language or you'll be lost. I mean, I'm massively interpreting what was said there. But I mean, for those of us who live in Luxembourg as foreign nationals, I think we know what it's like. And you need to learn these languages to be part of this digital future. Second takeaway, Python is simple. I'm going to test this theory, but of all the languages, it is one of the most accessible. And we invite viewers today to test that theory themselves. And lastly, and I think it was Nupur who said this, we're still at the start of leveraging the uses from all of this data that is being generated. And it can be used to solve some really, really important life problems. So if that's something that you or your child is interested in, then do dig deeper into this because it can be life-changing. So lastly, thank you so much to our wonderful panel, to David, to Mark, Nupur, to Claude, Prithvish, and to Madame Malty. And what next? So if this talk has whet your appetite, you can now purchase the book from Amazon. The paperback book costs €21 and the ebook is €10. There's also an option for people to order an author-signed copy from Workshop for Me's website. I believe the link is in the chat. Is that correct, Madame Malty?
Yes, we will be pasting the links on the chat.
It will be shortly. And if you watched the live stream and you want to watch this video back again because you found the talks compelling, I certainly did, then you can find this video on the YouTube channel of Workshop for Me. Now in Luxembourg, if you want to pursue this topic further, you can find out more about makerspaces. This is something that Mark began here in Luxembourg. And to find out more about that, you can visit bee, as in the insect, BEE, -creative.lu. And of course, you can always find out more from Workshop for Me. I think that's everything that we wanted to cover. Thank you so much, everybody. Is that okay for you, Madame Malty? Is there anything you wish to add?
Yes, before we end, I wanted to thank you, Jess. You have been so kind in taking through the panel. I want to individually thank each panelist for sharing their insights. It was so wonderful to have you all part of something big. For me, Pritish has written many books. For me, this is my first book. So it is extremely exciting for me to have it and to have such an esteemed panel, come in and make it their own and discuss a topic which is so important for us means a lot to me. Thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
very
Have a
much.
great evening.